Hey, this is Dave from metalepidemic.com. Thank you for checking out our YouTube video. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button below if you like this type of content, and we hope you enjoy the review. It's album review time once again, gentlemen, and for this review, Duncan Kyle and myself have been checking out the new album from St. Louis trio The Lion's Daughter. The band's new album, Skin Show, will be released on April 9th via Season of Mist. So, originally a Blackened sludge band, the trio abandoned all tradition and traversed into new territory through bold experimentations with album number 3, Future Cult, a synth-laden metal record that could easily serve as a score to a Dario Argento film. On Skin Show, the band picks up where it left off, once again delivering an opus that cannot be labelled or defined. The album was recorded at Firebrand Recording, produced and mixed by Sanford Parker. I think we just spoke about him recently.
Yeah.
Hate God, I think he did I Hate God. At Hypercube Studios and mastered by Colin Jordan at the Boiler Room. So, The Lion's Daughter, gentlemen. Any of you guys heard of The Lion's Daughter prior to this? No? I'd heard the name, but I hadn't listened to any of their music. I recognised the artwork from Future Cult, so I've obviously seen that somewhere, but I don't think I've actually listened to or had listened to any of their previous albums. So I did do a wee deep dive into some of their earlier material, and you can clearly hear a kind of heavier and bleaker vibe on their debut, A Black Sea, and then on Existence is Horror. You could hear more of the kind of Blackened elements starting to come through. But they always had a fairly experimental side, even on that first album. They did play a lot with various ideas. So although their sound is quite different in 2021, I'm not completely surprised that their sounds kind of changed over time. Future Cult, their previous album, was probably where they kind of embraced the full like synth mode and kind of delved more into the kind of like soundtracky side of their sound. That started to kind of shine through on that album. But I'd say that the synth work on that album was a lot more kind of in your face, kind of leaned into the band's darker side. With this new album, with Skin Show, they've not necessarily toned it down. It still feels very kind of gloomy, but it feels far more refined and more focused on this album, both in terms of the more kind of natural sounds they've used on the synths and how they've kind of implemented the sounds through each track. And we'll get into individual tracks in a minute, but first, I may know a guy whose wheelhouse is horror and Argento soundtracks. I'm very interested to hear what.
I'd like to meet that one.
I'd like to hear what Duncan thinks of this album, because when I heard the first single from the album, I instantly thought of Duncan. When that synth kicked in right at the beginning, I was like, this could be a Duncan album. So I'm interested to hear what did you make of The Lion's Daughter?
Right, get comfy, guys. Get comfy.
Okay, let's do that.
Let's sail out that top belt buckle. Put your hand in your pants. Right. Get comfy. That's what I'm saying.
Like I haven't been already.
I could tell. You were sitting awkwardly. But yeah, so it's a really interesting one. I am torn in parts on this. I think I'll put my cards down. Really enjoyed the album overall. I don't think everything they do necessarily works. But I see where they're going. Some of the experimentation they're doing, particularly with the synths, and I'm glad that you mentioned this reminded me a lot of, not because it sounds the same, but the ethos behind the use of the synths when The Sword started using synths more in their music. And they and it literally comes out of nowhere. There's an album where there's no synths, and then the next album there's like 5 songs with synths. And we got a chance to speak to them, and what they basically said is they wanted to try experimenting with it. They had access to vintage synths, so they experimented with those vintage sounds. Just so happens that they had a kind of 70s rock vibe, and then it just fit. And they've continued that on since, and I think it aids their music greatly. I think, having not heard their old stuff, you know, just taking this as a standalone album and without context, the synth work on here for the most part works really, really well, because it's not used in the typical way that a lot of synth parts are used. So synths in music tend to be, for the most part in metal, are used purely as an ambience at the background to layer up melody, or they're used as a way to deliver like counter melody or melody itself, kind of reiterate what the singer's doing. That is not how these guys approach synth at all, which to me was the first thing that kind of stood out to me. Was you really are kind of the synths on this are someone in the kind of proggy aspect. It's almost, which is probably why they're thinking Argento, because Argento famously worked with Goblin. Goblin are known for specifically being a prog rock band, not prog metal, probably were prog metal at the time. Prog rock band who were very synth driven. The keyboard player Claudio Simonetti would play a lot of his own stuff, and a lot of that stuff is seeped into the popular kind of culture. They're a lot heavier than Dario Argento would ever put in any fucking movie. I just want to stress that just now. He flirted with metal in the 80s, but it was all your Iron Maidens and shit like that. It wasn't anything fucking like this, right? The man's now in his 70s as well. It's unlikely the Lion's Daughter's gracing a new movie, right? That being said, that was the first thing that stood out to me, and I really enjoyed those aspects. I think the synth stuff is really interesting. Like, kept my attention going all the way, because I never quite knew what they were going to be using it for, and some of it's conventionally used and some of it very much is off in its own little world. So that was the first thing. I actually think, as cool as it is, sometimes it doesn't work. I think sometimes they play a synth bit that feels like it's not required. It's like it's there because I know the train of thought of, we'll keep this idea flowing. But there were certain bits where I was like, no, that's actually a really cool riff. This is where the keyboard shouldn't be here. Or I really like what you're doing as a band. The synth bit's a little bit distracting. So that was, and I don't usually say that about synths. So park that aside. Vocally, this is fucking great. I love this guy's tone. Love it. It's a kind of combination of like really angry, aggressive, kind of like sludgy / hardcorey sort of vocals, but there is tonal stuff there when he wants to shift into it, and it works really fucking well. Love the guitar tone on this. There's a really stripped back feel in the production that I felt personally. Like, once again, you bring synths in, there is a tendency to overcompensate, because synths don't sound like anything else. They sound refined already. There's a tendency to try and make things sound too polished. The band don't fall into that trap, which I think works very well from them. I think the owe a royalties check to Trent Reznor for All Hell Is Mine, because the start of that is Wish. I shit you not, is Wish. And you do, and you know what you did, and I love the fact that you did it, but you're going to acknowledge that you did it. You can't do that, the snary roll thing, without it being Wish. I'm just sorry. Like, they ruined it for everyone, is what I'm saying.
One of my notes is, Nine Inch Nails style bass on All Hell Is Mine.
Yeah, and it's just, and it goes along with the drum, like I just like rattling away in that snare, and it's the same beat. It's almost identically the same tempo, but yeah, there's a great mixture going on here. Like, musically, it's really, really inventive. It's really interesting. Kept my attention all the way through. Like I say, I think there's a couple of bits where there's a synth part that comes in. I'm like, I might not. Personally, I wouldn't have put a synth bit there, because sometimes you like the specialness of that instrument, is it not being used all the time? But then there are other parts in the music where I'm like, I'm surprised you don't have a synth bit there. So they are clearly conscious of how they're constructing their music very deftly with that. But as a whole package, it's a great album. It's a really great album. They don't sound like anyone I can quite put my finger on without comparing little bits to other bands. They have a sound which very much feels uniquely to them, to the point that I am very eager, very much like yourself. I know the album cover for the previous album, and I don't know why I know it, because I've never listened to it. So I'm very keen to go and check out the precursor to this for sure, because there's something that I can't put my finger on, but there's something really engaging and interesting about what the band's doing, and they don't compromise any of their heaviness, because there are kind of like retro, more organic synth sounds in there. It's a great album. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You were on the money. This is an album which felt very much pitched for me, because there's plenty going on. and they're a bit of an oddity. Like, you hear certain bits, and then the synth comes in, you're like, I can't imagine a synth being in a band like this. You know, like synth lines being in a band like that. But actually, when I hear it, I'm like, it totally goes. And he's not doing anything remotely like what the rest of the band's doing. So, I thoroughly interesting, rewarding listen.
Yeah, nice. Kyle, what did you make of this one?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Trent Reznor, because here it's like, this band is like if Trent Reznor was in 1972 in New York and invented black metal. This is what it would sound like. And it's like, yeah, some of it works really. I agree. Like, some of the synth parts were like, why is there no synth here? And some of it was like, why is there synth here?
Yeah.
It was like, it felt a bit weird, but it's their band. They do what they want. I really liked it. It was like, got really interesting. The beginning was like, the beginning of, what was it called? I've forgotten it now. Something about hell. My hell. I am in hell.
All hell is mine.
I am in. All hell is mine. Help me. I am. This is Wish. I was like, yeah, you did that, didn't you? Fair enough. But they've definitely clearly got some influences, and I don't know if they're willing to say it, but they're definitely willing to acknowledge it. And they're not afraid to get poppy. They're not afraid to go heavy as fuck. They're not afraid to do these things. They are just like, this is us. Take it or leave it. And I really like that about it. And the production was like, it really fits their sound. I don't know what's going on recently, but so many bands are coming out with productions that really fit what the band should sound like, and it's not like. It's not mastered and loud as fuck anymore, and it's not like it's super polished. Everything is super polished and super perfect either. It's something's going on with producers recently. It's really good, and this one is another example of producing to the sound of the band. It's
interesting that Dave said they did I Hate God, because I don't know, our review has dropped for that. Thank fuck. But that was one of the things we all doubled down, is the production on that 100% suits their sound, and this guy's obviously shown, and there's a bit of that rawness in here, but it's definitely not the same. I mean, actually these two bands could, like, I Hate God and The Lion's Daughter could totally tour together, and that would be a bitchin' lineup. There's enough difference here, you know what I mean?
A lot of it comes from their natural sounding synth, so like they've definitely put a mic up to a synthesizer. It's not a plug-in or anything. It's taken directly. It's got that organic, natural feel. I mean, like, you say that about a synth, but if you know about synths, you know it. Like, older synths have a very natural feel. They're very, very, very analog. It doesn't sound digital in any way. It's really good. I don't know how exactly they did it, but obviously it was recorded to I don't know if it's recorded to a click. It sounds like it, because everything's very much in time with each other and there's not too much give and take. But I don't know, maybe the drum's just amazing. But I mean, everything sounded so good. And track 4, Dead in Dreams, that was my standout track. And the title track is like the poppiest thing, and that's where that line about Trent Reznor inventing black metal in 1972. I was like, yep, that's the one. If Trent Reznor wasn't,
and the name of the songs as well. I know, like, we talked about Sango Sugabog, which I'm so happy I said that again. Like, with their kind of playful names. The names of these songs here as well, they're inviting. Like, you name a song Neon Teeth, I'm wanting to check out what that is. You know, it's like, it's a weirdly compelling album. And like I say, I can't put my finger on one aspect about it that I would double down as the reason to listen to it. It's the culmination of everything together that works. That makes sense. I don't know if that does make sense, or talking mass, but you know, it's like, you wouldn't just say, oh well, this is a guitarist band, or this is a synth band. You know, it's none of that. Like, there's nothing exceptional on any instrument in here, but collectively together, it is fucking great. Works all together really well.
Yeah, I think out of the 4 albums that they've released, this is by far the most memorable of the releases. Like, right from the get-go on this, like, Become the Night, it just hooked me in, that first track, you know, from the kind of the looping synth sounds to that kind of driving groove on the chorus. The opener for me was a total banger, and those kind of hooks, those moments are scattered right throughout the album, where it's like a synth melody on the chorus of like Curtains, and then you've got that, as I mentioned, the kind of 9 Inch Nails style on All Hell Is Mine, or the kind of load of kind of catchy vocal lines that will get stuck in your head as well. Neon Teeth was probably one of my favourite tracks on the album. So many different elements and interesting elements that keep you engaged the whole way through. It was a lot to take in on my first listen. I felt like I needed just a few listens to it to get my head fully around it, but after I got to grips with it, I was able to kind of fully like immerse myself in it and enjoy everything that I had to offer. Even the more like kind of abstract and experimental stuff, tracks like Dead and Dreams, which maybe doesn't have the big catchy chorus, but it still had something about it that caught my attention. In a similar way, Werewolf Hospital, great title, it kind of caught my attention as well, because the change in tempo and tone on that track, it's by far one of the most kind of gnarly and kind of Blackened tracks on the album. But it's placed in a really clever spot that kind of breaks things up on the album, which was really cool. Like yourself, I love the production. I think the mix is absolutely perfect. I like the fact the guitars are a little bit more controlled in the mix. They're not dominating in that album at all. They still provide like that layer of heaviness, but it's not a guitar-heavy album, I would say. I think the atmosphere and the different texture from the synths play a much bigger part in the album's kind of overall sound. If you listen to tracks like Snakeface, for example, the guitars and drums give the track kind of drive and power, but it's the synths or the component that takes the lead and kind of ultimately gives the track its character, to be honest. It's funny though, like when you mentioned earlier, when I was listening to this album, I could totally imagine The Lion's Daughter sharing a bill with a band like Zombi, for example.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, they could fit on a bill with much heavier bands like the Moth Gatherer or Arma or something like that, or even I Hate God. Their sound is definitely one that would cross over and work alongside various bands of different genres, which, like, once we get out of this fucking pandemic, will be exciting to see. But a really interesting band from that kind of point of view, where they could just fit on different bills really easily. I'd say this is probably the most kind of refined The Lion's Daughter have sounded, and I think they've found, for me, I thought it was 100% the correct balance of elements on this release. I think it's still very much a Lion's Daughter album. It's very dark and brooding, but it's also more focused and more direct, probably. And as I said, it's made it the most kind of memorable album for me to date. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I wasn't sure how I was going to get on with it, because I like synths, but I'm not as like big on them as like Duncan is. But I thought they were used perfectly on this. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this. Rating wise, for Skin Show, what are you thinking, Duncan? Where are you going with this one?
4.5 for me. Like I say, nice. There are a couple of things that don't quite gel with me that knock it down just a little bit. But yeah, like I say, I genuinely think I'm doing a lot of at the end of the year. I genuinely think at the end of the year I will not have heard another band that sound like The Lion's Daughter, which I think which can be a good thing and a bad thing. But I think they have enough elements that make them compelling enough. And it's all handled really well here. I think they are so close to a 5-star album. I think there's just a couple of bits that just need a little bit of tweaking. I'd be actually interested to hear a little bit more of the Blackened elements, because when they are in here, they're fucking great. It's that idea of it's a great little mix that you can add in there with the rest of the stuff's going on with it, and maybe a tiny little bit more sludge when you get some of those sludgier riffs. They sound fucking great. They don't overstay their welcome. Maybe that's a deliberate choice, but they are like tiny integers away from a 5-star album for me. So yeah, 4.5.
Nice one. Kyle, what about yourself?
I think I'm going to come in at a 4 out of 5. It was a very enjoyable album. Not something I listen to a lot of stuff like this, but then saying that, they're a very unique sounding band, and I've not really heard much like it before, even though I made the comparison to other people and other bands. It's like they've definitely made a sound all their own, and I like it a lot. So 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'd agree with Kyle. Actually, I'd probably go 4 out of 5 in this one. It's probably an album that I need to be in a particular mood for to listen to. It's not something I could just stick on like any time of the day, but when I do listen to it, I do enjoy it. I do think it's a really good album, and as I said, compared to the previous releases, this one is probably my favourite so far. This one drops on the 9th of April on Season of Mist. If you want to check the guys out, it's facebook.com/The Lion's Daughter. Give that album a little spin, see what you think. Hope you like it.